Welcome to the Purpose-Based Retirement with Certified Financial Planner Casey Weade. Casey is the president of Howard Bailey Financial.
Whatever risk you face during your retirement years, we've got a plan.
A published author and radio host.
It's not how much we make during the good times, it's how much we keep during those really bad times.
His advocacy for retirees and pre-retirees has made him a sought-after speaker and trusted financial leader.
And putting a real plan together.
This is the Purpose-Based Retirement.
Good to see you again. I'm Lee Kelso here with Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson, both certified financial planners with Howard Bailey Financial. We're beginning the program today by helping you answer an important question. Just how much money should you be saving each month to ensure a comfortable retirement? We're also going to be answering viewer questions, one from a couple who says their pensions are very generous. So what should they do with all the money they've already saved to be in consistent line with the purpose-based retirement philosophy? And then a little bit later in the program, we'll take a look at exactly what happens when you're facing a tax time bomb. All right, so let's get to the questions, and let's start with Casey and the savings rate. You know, we all are always told we're never saving enough, or we ought to be saving enough for retirement. Sure. How do you know what that is?
Exactly. We always hear those rules of thumb. Save 10% for retirement. Maybe you've heard you should save 20% for retirement, or just get 5%, get the match, and go ahead and put those savings elsewhere. And I think it's very confusing at times to figure out what that number really is. And that's because, number one, it's different for every single person. Some people should be saving 50% because of their goals of retiring in 20 years or 25 years, or sometimes in cases even more than that because they want to retire in 10 years, whatever that might be. So it's a matter of several different things that we're going to go through here today. We're going to go through 4 different steps that you can go through in order to define how much you really need to have saved for retirement, and then determining what that savings percentage is so that you can actually meet that goal of having that amount saved once you get to that point.
Yeah, so you actually have a formula, a mathematical equation that you can undertake so that you know you're hitting your number, right?
We do, and that first thing that we have to do is we have to figure out what that replacement ratio is. And so what we're going to do in order to come up with that is we're going to take those different incomes that you have. We're going to take your pension, your Social Security, etc., and then we're going to subtract that from what your monthly expenses are, your annual expenses, in order to come up with that replacement ratio. So as we look at that, we're going to take your annual expenses minus your retirement income sources, and that gives you your replacement rate. And so if we're spending $72,000 a year, $6,000 a month, take $72,000 minus whatever those retirement income sources are. Social Security, a pension, let's say that's $48,000 a year. So $72,000 minus $48,000 is $24,000. That is your replacement rate. And that is the number that we're going to use in order to figure out how much we actually have to have saved for retirement. The next thing we have to determine is what that withdrawal rate is going to be once you step into retirement. So step 2, now we have to figure out how much you can take out of that portfolio that you've worked so hard to save and make it last a lifetime. And we've heard of something called the prudent man's rule before. You've probably heard of the 4% withdrawal rule, also known as prudent man's rule. And that says that we should be able to take a portfolio of 60-40, a balanced portfolio as we step into retirement, draw 4% a year out of it. So if we have $1 million saved for retirement, we can draw $40,000 a year and reasonably expect that to last a lifetime. Now, we've heard that that could be 2%, 3%, 5%, or maybe even you've heard as high as 6% per year. It is determined by a number of different factors, and definitely by the factors in the economy by the time you actually step into retirement. Things such as interest rates can really put a dampening blow to that withdrawal rate, and that's what we're seeing today. But if we have a long time before we get to that point, there's nothing wrong with using those rules of thumb, say 20 or 30 years from retirement. Then we want to go ahead and we need to calculate what that number is. What's that wealth number, that wealth accumulation number we need to hit by the time we step into retirement? So what we're going to use is we're going to use that withdrawal rate and we're going to divide it by our income gap. So if that income gap is $24,000 a year, we'll take our 4%, divide it by $24,000, and that means we have to have $600,000 by the time we get to retirement. So Lee, does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does. I think it will help people quantify that number when they're dealing with so many variables. Now, you've got something else here to take us through exactly how much we're going to have to save depending on the length of our retirement.
Exactly, because now we've gotten to that point where we've figured out what that number is that we have to have saved. You know your wealth accumulation number. The next step depends on a number of different factors, including your rate of return, how long you're going to be saving for retirement, and how long you're actually going to be in retirement once you get there. And there's been some really interesting research that's been done on that using historical rates of return, given different types of portfolios that are conservative, moderate, or considered more aggressive. So let's take someone that has a replacement rate of 50%. So you're making $100,000 a year, and you want to replace half of that salary, or 50% of that. That's $50,000 a year. So that replacement rate of 50%, and let's say you want to retire in 20 years. If you want to retire in 20 years and you want to be retired for 30 years, then we need to have saved about 40% annually in order to get to retirement if we're in a conservative portfolio. Now, if we take that down a step further to where most people might be, that 70% replacement rate. So we're maybe making $100,000 a year, spending $70,000 a year. Now, if we want to retire in 30 years and be in retirement for 30 years, we need to save 27% instead of 20%. And so that is how we get to that ultimate number. But there's something I really want to take a moment to point out here, and that is the difference between the conservative savings rate and the more aggressive portfolio savings rate. That conservative savings rate over 30 years with a 30-year retirement is 27% that we have to save out of every paycheck. And if we go out to the more aggressive 80-20 portfolio, now we need to save 20% of our paycheck. A very minor difference from 27 to 21%. And I think what that illustrates is that we don't have to be all that much more aggressive in order to get to that end goal of actually getting to retirement, or getting you to where you want to be as you step into retirement.
Yeah, why take the extra risk if it's not that much benefit? Marshall, if I'm pretty young and just kind of getting started and maybe I can't come up with all those variables yet, what kind of advice do you give me?
You know, I think don't focus so much on the rates of return. He illustrated there that it's more important about the rate that you're saving, because in the end, it's more important to save than those actual rates of return. So do everything you can, but that old rule of thumb, if you can save 12-15% of your income over a lifetime, you're going to be in pretty good shape.
For most people, that'll be the case. And again, it's about return on investment. It's about return on life, not return on investment. And it's really ultimately about how much you save, not how much you earn year over year. And working with a good financial planner, especially a certified financial planner, can help get you on that road to finding that number. I've got a couple that I started working with here at the end of last year that have about 25 years till they retire. We don't work with a lot of young couples like that, but being 25 years out, I told them, hey, you guys don't necessarily need us. You're doing a good job. They were very aggressive, and they were on a very aggressive savings schedule, and they were going to be perfectly fine with the amount of time they had to get to retirement. But they said, you know, Casey, we don't mind paying a little bit every single year in order to have somebody that we can rely on, especially the wife. She really wanted to know that if something happened to her husband, that she had somebody that she could rely on, that understood their financial plan and could continue to steward them on to retirement. And in reality, they were using mutual funds, and it was about the same cost that they were paying inside their mutual funds in order to have somebody to work with and rely on and be there for them every single year.
Well, you can't beat peace of mind, and that's what we want to offer you right now. So for the next 10 people who call us right now, we're offering a complimentary review of your entire financial and retirement plan. It's a chance to get an education about your money so you can make the very best decisions you can going forward. So for the next 10 callers at 482-9559, Casey, Marshall, and the team will make some time on the calendar to visit with you and give you your very own purpose-based retirement. We're back to take questions from viewers in just a moment.
When you have confidence in your retirement future, you can live the life you've always imagined. Because of planning, you now have time to reflect on the wonderful memories of your life. You and your spouse finally have the luxury of leisure time together. To spend fun times with your grandkids, sharing the joy of their excitement about life. Smiling at the thought of quality time with your children and of picking up the check. At last, you have time to breathe and rekindle the love of your life. Why? Because you imagined what could be. You planned for retirement. So today, you own your future.
You need a plan for retirement to create the lifestyle you've always dreamed of. The first step is to tune into the Purpose-Based Retirement Radio Hour with your hosts, Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson, every Saturday morning at 11 and Sunday afternoon at 1 on 1190 WOWO and 107.5 FM.
You don't walk into a doctor's office for some blanket prescription for whatever ails you. You expect individualized attention, a doctor who listens, and a treatment prescribed to meet your specific need. When it comes to your financial future, why expect anything less? If you would like an independent checkup from an independent advisor with access to hundreds of possible solutions to help you meet your goals, contact us today.
This is the part of the program where we answer questions from viewers, and we'll be starting today with Molly from Van Wert. So Molly on the line, go right ahead.
My husband and I are in our mid-40s and feel like we have a pretty good handle on our finances. Retirement is still a good 20 years out. I don't want to incur any unnecessary expenses, but would like to know we are on the right path. When do you think is the right time to meet or hire a financial advisor?
Well, Molly, I think meet and hire are two different things, right? There's a lot of advisors that you can get with and have a consultation with, especially a fee-based advisor. Typically, you can have your first consultation without charge, and that can typically be one that can help you know that you're on the right path or not. And that's typically how our meetings are conducted. Somebody comes in, they meet with us for half an hour to an hour, and during that session, we just determine if we are potentially a good fit and if we can help. And I can't remember the last time I had a meeting with someone where they didn't walk out with some type of value. Even if it was just an additional tax savings that saved them a few $100s a year, I can't think of a place that I found where I met with someone and we didn't have some type of mutual benefit. And so at the end of that meeting, I think you can have that meeting and either decide to work with that person and hire him or walk away knowing that you're on the right path. And it doesn't mean that you have to wait until you're at retirement to start working with someone or a financial advisor. You might be 20 years out, you might be 30 years out, and you might ultimately find that you don't incur any unnecessary expenses because many times you can move, especially if you're a mutual fund investor, going from where you're at today with a fee-based advisor. If they're a low-cost fee-based advisor using ETFs and individual equities, avoiding the mutual fund world, you might actually maintain the same cost that you have today or actually have a lower cost and now have someone that you can rely on to take you through those retirement years.
Yeah, Casey, we sit down with lots of families throughout the year where they look at us and go, well, gee, am I a good fit for what you do? And oftentimes it's okay to be honest and say, you know what, you don't need us quite yet. But the reality is that a lot of people we can work with and trim their fat, reduce their fees, and sometimes save them an awful lot of money and make sure they're on the right track. So I love your answer there.
And I think the best relationships that I've had have been with people that have worked with a financial advisor for a number of years. They've worked with someone for 20 or 30 years, and then they've just decided, now I need someone that knows a little bit more about retirement, that specializes in retirement, not just getting me to retirement, because this stage is just a little bit more complicated than it's been in the past, and there's more to think about. And working with a specialist as you step into retirement can add that other element that might be risk management. It might be taking care of your long-term care, or taking care of your estate planning or your income planning, but adding those other elements that the accumulation planner just doesn't specialize in. And that's really where we typically fall into play. We're usually working with those people that are 5-10 years out from retirement and beginning to implement that retirement plan. But there are those outliers that are 20 or 30 years out from retirement that just want to know that they're on the right path and have someone to check in with and just make sure they're hitting everything the way they're supposed to be.
All right, Molly, thank you for your call. You were talking about mutual funds there, and that has Andrea a bit worried. Andrea, go right ahead.
I've been investing in mutual funds for about the last 20 years, but lately I've heard and read a lot of negative information about them. They've treated me fairly well so far. Is this all just a sales pitch, or has something really changed?
That is a wonderful question, Andrea. You know, there was a time, Casey, where mutual funds were the only vehicle in town, and companies actually named themselves after certain types of mutual funds. You know, Andrea, when I started working in this business, it was all about mutual funds, and for many households, that's all that they were able to get into, Casey, because of lifestyle or the amount of savings that they had. But I can tell you a lot has changed. Technology has improved what financial services can provide for even the most modest household. And so there's lower expenses, there's lower costs. It's not just a sales pitch in the sense that you can actually save money and get on a better track for retirement.
Yeah, well, I mean, like you said, it used to be really the only way for someone that was just starting to save for retirement, saving $100 out of every paycheck, or maybe you had a few $1,000s you wanted to get invested, even $50,000 or $200,000 you wanted to have invested. You wanted to have professional management and real diversification. However, when you brought that into the financial advisor's office, they said, well, we can't really actively manage it, but we've got these great actively managed mutual funds. And this is an A share. Maybe it charges you 4 or 5% up front, or you have 1.5%, 2% in ongoing expenses. But it gives you diversification, and it gives you professional management. Now they actually have actively managed ETFs or exchange traded funds. We have things like separately managed accounts where you can get true diversification and a portfolio manager that's working exclusively for you to manage that portfolio and minimize your costs. So we can do that at much lower cost today than we used to be able to. And so I think you're on the right track. And yes, they've maybe gotten you where you're at today, but the world's evolved. There are other things out there today, other tools that can get us through this next stage. I mean, fire got man through the first few thousand years, right? But then we came up with microwaves, and it made a much more convenient, efficient way to cook our meal. So keep that in mind.
Sometimes fire in the microwave still happens, but that's a story for another day. So let's get on now to Ross. And Ross, you're in a pretty enviable situation. Go ahead and tell us about it.
My wife and I have saved more money than we need for retirement. Actually, we don't need any of it with our pensions and Social Security benefits. We have about $500,000 saved in various types of accounts. So when it comes to your purpose-based retirement philosophy, which one of the 4 purposes do we focus on?
Well, Ross, to refresh you at home, there's 4 different pieces to a purpose-based retirement. We have liquidity for emergencies, income for retirement, growth for inflation protection, and then estate planning, which takes care of the money that's left over after we've filled in the gaps. So we've got our emergency fund, our income, our growth. Now, Ross, you find yourself in a position where it sounds like you've maybe got enough Social Security and pension, you've got your emergency fund fully funded, you've got growth money set aside in maybe equities or ETFs, a growth portfolio, or at least a moderate portfolio, a mix of stocks and bonds to deliver that inflation protection. And now you have some of these extra funds left over. With these extra funds, now it's time to fill in the gaps. And you could either do that by beginning to set up an estate plan, a legacy strategy, maximizing the size of that legacy that you're leaving behind. And maybe that's not an interest to you, but maybe you're concerned about health care costs in the future. Nursing home costs could be anywhere from $5,000, $10,000, and if you're maybe a couple decades out from needing them, it might even be higher. So we can prepare for those things with a lot of different long-term care options as well, whether that's a long-term care policy or being that you have a substantial amount of assets left over, you may be able to position those assets in an account that generates a decent rate of return. So maybe you're generating 3 to 5% in growth on that $500,000, but if you need it for long-term care, it turns into $1 million or $2 million for long-term care purposes, or if you don't need it, it passes on in the way of a death benefit in that $1 to $2 million range. So there's a lot of different options for you to consider. I would just emphasize, again, I know you're following the purpose-based retirement philosophy, but the closest distance between 2 points is a straight line. Pick the vehicles that most efficiently accomplish the most likely use of those dollars, and you'll be on the right track.
Thanks to all our callers today, and if you have a question that you'd like to see featured on the program, just send it to info@howardbailey.com. All right, here's our question of the day. It has to do with Roth IRAs, and that is, Are your Roth IRAs, the minimum required distributions from a Roth IRAs, does that apply? We'll have the answer when we come back.
It's your retirement. How will you live it? How will you be remembered?
Will you be able to take me on vacation?
Will you be there for my ball games?
Will you teach me your values? You'll be able to play with me.
Oh, help me go to college.
How will I remember you?
You need a plan for retirement to create the lifestyle you've always dreamed of. The first step is to tune into the Purpose-Based Retirement Radio Hour with your hosts, Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson, every Saturday morning at 11 and Sunday afternoon at 1 on 1190 WOWO and 107.5 FM.
You don't walk into a doctor's office for some blanket prescription for whatever ails you. You expect individualized attention, a doctor who listens, and a treatment prescribed to meet your specific need. When it comes to your financial future, why expect anything less? If you would like an independent checkup from an independent advisor with access to hundreds of possible solutions to help you meet your goals, contact us today.
And welcome back. Our question of the day was, are required minimum distributions, do they apply to Roth IRAs? Now think about that one carefully because it's kind of a tricky question, right?
Well, Lee, the answer is true, and I know I tricked quite a few people with that question here today, and I want to make sure that you really understand why I said it was true. Required minimum distributions, wonderful thing you may be saying to yourself about Roth IRAs is, I don't have to take distributions like I do my IRAs or 401ks after I reach the age of 70 and a half, and maybe you're saying, well, that's why I did the Roth conversion when I did it, because I didn't want that extra taxable income as I stepped into those later years of retirement. Well, in reality, you're fine. Yes, you won't have to take distributions from that Roth IRA like you will your IRAs. However, when that asset passes on to your heirs, they do have to take required minimum distributions. But how do you manage those required minimum distributions during your retirement years best? And we're going to explore that here as we explore Roth IRAs at the same time during this segment. We're going to do so talking about a tax time bomb tale. And we're going to do it utilizing Dr. X. And I use Dr. X because quite often we see this with physicians where they've built up a substantial, or maybe high income earners build up a substantial amount of 401k dollars or IRA dollars, tax deferred dollars, because in your high income earning years, you're trying to defer as much of that income as you can in order to get to retirement where you hope to be in a lower tax bracket. And at the same time, we often see you maxing out those 401ks and then leaving some assets set aside in taxable accounts. And so this Dr. X is married, age 66, has about $2.5 million in their IRA account, $1 million in a taxable account, so an after-tax account. They've already paid taxes on the million, but they've never paid a dime in taxes on that $2.5 million. But guess what? When you turn the age of 70 and a half, Uncle Sam wants you to begin taking distributions from that IRA. And being that we're stepping into those later years and an IRA is of that size, it can really push you up into a larger and larger tax bracket. Typically that number starts at about 3.5% of the account value of the IRA, and it goes up a little bit each year. Now the current tax bracket is going to be very low for Dr. X because they're planning on spending those taxable dollars and deferring those IRA dollars until they're forced to begin those distributions. If they stay on that path, we're going to see that over the next few years they stay in a very low tax bracket, in that 10-15% bracket, depending on how they invest the $1 million taxable account. But then when they begin to take those required minimum distributions, they quickly jump up from the 25% bracket into the 28% bracket and getting very darn close to that 33% bracket in those later years. Now, if we look at that taxable income and what's going on every single year, we see there's very little taxable income being generated, just the dividends or income being generated from that $1 million taxable account over the first few years, but then it jumps all the way up to the 25% bracket and then into the 28% bracket. So you might say to yourself, well, why don't we go ahead and do some Roth conversions? So we're going to spend the taxable funds and convert as much of that Roth IRA as that traditional IRA every year in order to maintain that 15% tax bracket. If we do so, then we're still going to get into that 28% bracket, but much later in those retirement years, and end up netting a lot more dollars into you or to your heirs for that matter. But then why wouldn't we go ahead and convert to the 25% bracket? Because the rule with Roth IRAs is we convert if we're going to be in a higher tax bracket in those later years than we're in today. So we'll pay the taxes now in lieu of being in a higher tax bracket later. So now we go ahead and fill up those 25% brackets and we never hit the 28% bracket. Well, what else could be done if we wanted to maximize how much could be converted to a Roth IRA every year and reduce the tax burden of those traditional IRA funds? Well, one, we could donate appreciated securities to charity in order to generate additional deductions that we can use for Roth conversions. Two, we could take out a mortgage. You could take out a mortgage in order to generate some deductible interest. Number three, we could take the fixed income. Maybe we have fixed income or bonds that are generating ordinary income, short-term capital gains. Maybe take those tax inefficient assets and move them from the taxable accounts over to the IRA and the equities over to the taxable accounts where we can generate long-term capital gains or maybe even very low dividend income. Then we could also relocate, of course, to a low tax state that would have zero taxable income for estate tax, and that would be Florida or Texas, for instance. So this would be some additional ideas for us to convert even more dollars to Roth IRA from that traditional IRA and save you from paying Uncle Sam any more than you're legally required to.
Roths are really interesting devices. Is that something I should be working with myself? Should I be looking at doing those Roth conversions on my own?
You know, I think you can, yes. I think when it comes to something of this magnitude, it makes sense to involve your CPA and your financial planner because we want to make sure that we're converting the right assets to that, to the IRA, to the Roth IRA. For instance, maybe you had some energy equities, some utilities and things like that that got beat up. Well, maybe we want to take those things that are down a little bit and do the conversion on them so that they can grow and really appreciate that tax-free growth, and take those tax-deferred dollars that are maybe more appreciated and go ahead and leave those alone. So involve your certified financial planner and your CPA. Always gives you the best product in the end.
Excellent, and we have an opportunity for that right now. For the next 10 people who call us right away, we're offering a complimentary financial review of your entire financial and retirement plan, an opportunity to learn more about your money because we want you to make the absolute best decisions you can moving forward. So for the next 10 callers, Casey and the team will make time on the calendar, visit with you, and give you your very own purpose-based retirement. We'll see you next time around.